I'm Stephen Town. I'm Director of Information and University Librarian at the University of York, and it's my privilege and great pleasure to welcome you all to the university today. I think we've got a very interesting day in prospect, and it's good to see so many people who are interested in coming to hear about Alma. It says 1 year on. No disrespect, but it seems like longer, if I'm not stealing anybody's joke. It's my job just to give you a bit of welcome and introduction and a bit of context about the university today, and just to make a few remarks about how I see Alma from my perspective. Chris Elwood will then talk about building the business case, and Sarah Thompson about managing the project and some of the cultural changes associated with that. Then we move into some of our perhaps more technical staff giving you an overview of how Alma works at York. Lunch will be at 12:30. All of this morning is in this building, but this afternoon we move to other places, and you have the normal university complex room numbering system on your programs, but there will be people around to help get you to the right place. The breakout sessions are spread around, and final close about 4 o'clock. Just a few words about the University of York to give you the context. University of York is a relatively new university, founded in 1963, so we've just celebrated our 50th year. Of course, we don't believe in league tables at York, but if we did, we would tell you we're roughly kind of top 12, 10 to 15 in the UK by the kind of newspaper standards. We were 8th in the last research assessment exercise, and we're waiting to see the outcome of the REF, of course, like other people. We're exactly 100 in the world. We're now part of the Russell Group, but we're also part of other partnerships that are important to us, not just in a university context, but in a library context, so White Rose particularly. We're not huge by UK standards, probably small to medium size. We're an interesting university because we operate to a flat structure, so 30 departments. We don't have faculties or schools yet, although we do have a new Vice-Chancellor, and there are propositions perhaps to alter that. But we have the normal range of subjects, perhaps without heavy engineering end. We've doubled the size of our campus in recent years, which has allowed us to grow. Our student numbers have gone up by about 50% in the last 5 or 6 years. York's always had a collegiate structure. It's always worked in a very inclusive way, and one of the challenges for the university is to keep that the good things that go with being small when you grow to larger size. So the library, again, not sure how useful these metrics are, but we have over 1 million items in the traditional library. We have around probably 120 staff now. We do have extensive archives, which are not really included in those figures. We have developing digital library experience. We had a big refurbishment, as many universities have done, between 2010 and 2012. So when you go into the libraries, you will see, hopefully, modern, up-to-date facilities. We achieved Customer Service Excellence Award this year, and we are part of what some people might call a converged directorate. So as Director of Information, I run IT, library, and it is interesting having the responsibility for all the information systems in the university. That's an important element of perhaps of thinking about Alma within that, and also for information strategy. We are now an RL UK member, and that certainly, I think, made us think about ourselves in a different way. When we're in the 94 group, we occupied a certain position well to the top of that group. When you go into RL UK, you're in amongst the very big people, and I think that gives you a change of perception, which others may talk about. Despite being fairly young, we do have some special collections. And I only put this slide in because one of the things that systems need to do is to leverage the full benefit of those special collections. So we have a lot of work going on in terms of making sure we can get those things known about and experienced by people in the digital environment. So a lot of projects going on that side, and also helping other people to leverage their catalogues into the kind of worldwide framework of special collections. Another thing that's perhaps distinctive, we're very keen on high performance here, but that performance has to relate back to our values. And I think that's something that perhaps others will talk about when we get to the cultural elements. So when we thought about Alma and developing our systems, these are the kind of comments that users made in our LibQual survey back in 2011. And I guess many of you will have similar comments from your people. What users expect to see is a simple landscape, ability to get to the stuff quickly and easily. And because we believe in excellence, we are strongly driven by what our users say. So just to finish off, I'm going to say something about my strategic expectations of really any system, but perhaps related to Alma. First of all, excellence. One of the motivations for our systems, like everything else, is that they need to be of international rank. We expect to be using things that are used by leading libraries worldwide, and we expect the elements of that to be benchmarkable against the best in the world. Some of that means functional excellence, and other people can talk about what that means, but it's important that our systems are serious, beneficial capital assets rather than the opposite. And of course, because of our approach to procurement and other things, we're keen on partnership and we're keen on shared service approaches, so those things are important too. But you don't get good by chance, you get it by careful and thoughtful ways of improving and developing. So development method is important to us within the University of York. And other people will talk about technical standards, but we expect all of our projects to run according to things like management of successful programs, Prince2 approaches, or other project methodologies. We expect to work with partners in an integrated project team, and we expect to be part of a community approach because we do see ourselves part of that wider community of universities and libraries. Strategic fit is something we talked about, and Chris will talk more about this, but the key element of strategic fit is that our systems need to meet university need, and not just need now, but need in the future. So all those important things that research libraries will need to do down the line, research data management, open access, all those other things are very important to us. We need to be able to integrate our systems into the rest of our best of breed stable. And if you're interested, you can look at our information strategy and our IT strategy and see that our library system has to contribute to effective information flow, and it has to be a technical fit and meet our strategic IT choices too. And finally, what I'm looking for from a system is its ability to support performance through effective data. Any system has to deliver us big, or at least medium-sized data, in order to correlate that with other data to show that the library is making value and impact. And I guess others will talk a bit more about that. So thanks for listening to me. Welcome to York again. I'm going to pass over to Chris now. But great to see you all here, and I hope you have a really interesting day. Thank you.
Thank you for all coming. There's a few more than we expected, so this is really great. So I'm going to talk a bit about the Alma business case, which is why did we get embarked on this whole project in the first place, really. So to give you a bit of context, in 2011 we had the restructure, which Stephen alluded to, where we brought together the library archives and IT services. And at that point, we also restructured who was in charge of what. So at that point, I moved from being in charge of academic liaison and library systems to being head of content. Content in that instance is all the traditional bibliographic services, acquisitions, cataloguing, and also our library systems, so the library management system and also the digital library. So we brought all those together as head of content. So I started that in 2011. We had the previous information strategy, which already had specific outcomes relating to improved discovery, as Stephen has mentioned, and improving access to all the content, but plus also improving our processes, streamlining things, and improving our staff capability and culture. We've had Aleph since 2002, and you can get into a bit of a silo of how you do things. You all have experienced that. And Aleph, for us, worked quite well. It enabled us to do a lot of things really easily. But the staff were just kind of plodding along, if you like, just being able to do this, do this, do this. And there was no real feeling of we can move on and do things in a new way and sort of any excitement or innovation going on there, because Aleph just did stuff. Staff just did stuff. So I think that's where we were there. We were sort of thinking, what shall we do next? So what did we do next? Soon after I started as head of content, we met up with Christoph and Alex for a meeting about Alma specifically, or the future. And during that, we actually, and that was with Sarah, we actually decided, let's go mad and let's really see if we can become early adopters of Alma. So Christoph and Alex did a really good sales job on us. So after we'd had that initial meeting, we looked around, we looked at the detail of Alma, we looked around and sought to see if there was anything else out there. But importantly, we talked to our teams of people on the ground and said, okay, we are ticking over with Aleph. What do you think about moving to a new system? And the initial reaction obviously is, oh my good, why? But we had those conversations about, well, you're always moaning about this bit, or you always wanted to do more here, or you're always thinking, can we do this? And Alma is not really going to go in that direction. So what do you think? So we just had those conversations. We kept going round that little loop. And eventually, the people up in the back row there can tell me I was terrible to make them do it. But eventually, everyone sort of said, well, OK, let's give it a whirl. Let's have a look at this and give it a go. So part of that also then was the business case, and I'll come more onto that in a minute. And we also discussed it with our procurement people in the university. And initially, they were a bit reluctant, and I'll come onto that a little bit as well. We were the first UK library to sign our contract in May 2011. And the European Early Adopter Kick-Off meeting happened in York in July 2011. That brought together most of the UK libraries, but after that meeting, some more came on board, including Manchester. So we actually became a much bigger group of people after that. And that first meeting, we were talking about, this is what Alma looks like, these are the developments we need to make in order to make it work for the UK and for Europe in general. And this is where, as Stephen said, it feels like a lot longer. It's because we started talking about it in February 2011. We had a bit of a hiatus then between July 2011, the kick-off, and the York project kick-off. And it was quite hard during that period just to keep the momentum going and keep people interested, because people actually had got so enthusiastic at that point, unbelievably, that people say, well, can't we start now? Can't we start now? But realistically, we had to fit in with Ex Libris's timescales and the product development timescale. So we kicked off in October 2012. Sarah will talk more about then what happened between then and August 2013, when we actually went live on time. So in the business case, what points did we make there? So this is actually completely lifted from the business case that we made at the time. And it all still seems very relevant, so that's quite good. So it's the normal things. We want to manage all resources together. Alma was being developed from the ground up, and we saw that as an advantage because we weren't going to be stuck with old ways of thinking, either in the technology used or in the workflows. So we were hopeful that this would give us a much better way of doing things for the future. I'll come back to whether we were successful in all of those things in a bit. It's a cloud solution. We wanted to reduce the IT support that we required locally so that our IT people in the library could spend more time developing the system, doing integrations, developing the front end, that kind of thing. As Stephen says, discoverability is much more important, so we wanted to spend more time thinking about things like that. It uses web-based open interfaces, and our colleagues in IT services basically use that kind of technology, so we were much more interested in getting integrations going. It has a community zone for sharing data, and of course shared services is one of the big things that has come up recently. And we were also promised built-in analytics reports and visualizations. So I guess those are all the normal things that people will be thinking of in a new system. And while Aleph did some of those reasonably okay, there wasn't really a sense of momentum in moving it forward and doing new things. So why become an early adopter, as in not wait for a couple of years and see how it's going, like most of you in this room, being sensible people? Well, we were offered a bit of an advantage on the subscription costs, but that wasn't really the main thing. What we wanted was to have input into the development at an early stage and opportunity to work with international partners on what is a completely brand new system. The opportunity we felt of getting in from the ground and actually really influencing how it was developed was really attractive to us. And the timing, as I've explained before, because we'd had this restructure and I'd just taken over head of content, there's a real drive at that point to change the way we did things in content, particularly, and the search and discovery. So the timing was actually perfect for that, and we thought that this would enable our staff to start thinking in new ways. Rather than try and do new processes and new jobs with the same old system, it would help us free that kind of thing up. So the strategic drivers, the main ones, enabling change, minimising management costs, modern technology, and being leading edge. So enabling change, we wanted to improve and streamline our processes and enable new, unique and value-added services. So that is about, a lot of that about digitisation, surfacing our unique content in digital library and special collections and archives, but also just focusing on making things much more easy to find for the users. And part of that is, without spending extra money on staffing, is increased staff capacity by reducing time spent on the old way of doing things. More digitisation, cataloguing of media in the digital library, and we're taking a strong role in our campus research information system, which is Pure in our case. So we're doing a lot of work on data checking and data quality checking for that. We did a lot of that for the REF, and going forward we're making sure that all the publications that the academics deposit into Pure have high quality metadata attached to them. So that's a growing area. So enable us to do all of that, we needed to reduce the time spent on some of the other things. And we wanted to develop our staff capability. As I said before, people were jogging along in a kind of fairly standard way, but we felt, you know, we were wasting their talents in many ways. And so we wanted to introduce more of a culture of continuous improvement and innovation. And we thought Alma would help us do that. Minimising management costs, the cloud. We were really fortunate again in the timing that the university was going to Google Apps for Education. So that was all in the cloud. So the fact that Alma and Primo were in the cloud was neither here nor there. We just needed to make sure it all fitted in terms of the data protection and so forth. But we were already on the route to doing a lot of cloud in the university. So fortunately, we didn't have any issues with that at all. So we were quite lucky there. No more hardware purchase and management costs. So our IT guys really happy that they didn't have to manage boxes anymore. So that was great. And minimising software management. So again, all in the cloud, so all the upgrades and all of that just happen, which is mostly an upside, or occasionally has a downside, which we'll come on to later in the day, I think. We wanted to facilitate shared services, so the community zone and that kind of thing. The technology used was also important. at the time, it was using Java APIs and web services, and that was exactly the technology that our IT enterprise systems people were using and beginning to use even more. They were basically, they've been over the last 3 years transitioning from different technology through into Java and APIs, agile development and that kind of thing. So again, the timing fitted really well with the way that our IT services were moving and the way Alma was doing its being developed. So again, the timing was great in that, from that sense. Community zone, I've already really mentioned. And this will allow us the flexibility to develop our own integrations. And because the technology fits with what our IT services is doing, they will be able to help us with doing those developments and integrations. Leading the edge. At the time, there was no other new generation system available. And I think even now, most people would say Alma is the most developed of the new generation systems. We look around and it still is ahead of the game. The early adopter, we wanted the influence and to be part of that community. So to make the decision, just to summarise really, it was a strong strategic fit, which I've mentioned quite a few things there. The timing was good. We're a long-standing Ex Libris customer, and there were no other systems or partnerships really out there. All of those things we told our procurement people when they said you should go out to tender. So those basically were the main points we made in terms of why we didn't want to go out to tender. And in the end, it was agreed that it was an upgrade from Aleph, because Aleph would start being developed less, and Alma would be the path forward. So we got them to agree that we could just do that, which saved a whole bunch of work. So have we met this business case? So enabling change, absolutely we have. And actually, if we took one thing away from this, the fact that it's opened up our ability to change with the times and do new things, and our staff on the ground, and you'll hear a lot of them talking later in this afternoon, is they have changed from just plodding along, doing Aleph, to actually being really creative in the way that they think about the system. So Alma has not been perfect, but what the people on the ground have done is looked at ideas about, it's not perfect, so this doesn't work, but actually, if Ex Libris did this and that, how could they make it better? So our staff have really engaged in that making it better side of things. And we've had Ex Libris, Carmeet came, and some of the developers, and they've been really impressed with our staff who've been presenting this. This is why we think it's a problem, but here's an idea about how it might work better. And our staff have been really impressed, Ex Libris, with their creativity. So I think that's one area I'd like to emphasise a lot, and Sarah will again later, because actually it's the thing that made it work. Managing all resources together, we were a bit cautious in bringing the digital in at the early stages. So we've integrated print and electronic, and we're basically about to embark on the digital. We met our aim, but we need to embark on the digital side now. The reducing local IT costs, absolutely, it absolutely has. So that's brilliant. The analytics and reports, partial. A lot more people are now running and designing reports and finding it much easier. A lot of the colleagues we're speaking to have designed their own reports, and they can do that instead of it all being a systems librarian task. So lots of people can get involved in that much, much more. It's not quite there yet. There has been some elements that aren't actually in the analytics system. It is improving all the time. One of the key things that was missing has literally just appeared very recently. So it is changing and improving all the time. And you do get nice graphs and reports. And you hear about that later. Meeting future functionality and workflow needs. Again, it's a from the ground up system. So while some things worked much better, some things are not quite as smooth as we think they could be. But again, that's where our staff on the ground have been coming up with ideas, and Ex Libris taking them on board and developing some of those. And there have been a lot of improvements in the last year. The community zone, I think, is a little bit underdeveloped at the moment, but again, it's a brand new system, and there's not been that many people contributing yet. So it will get there. The knowledge base is okay. Mark record quality is a tad patchy at the moment, but there is a group that Ex Libris is working on that whole community zone of catalogue records. The development and code side of it, they've launched relatively recently the development zone and the developer network. So that I envisage will grow quite a lot over the next year or so. And the web-based open interfaces, we managed to quite easily here actually integrate all the things we had with Aleph. So the entry system, the book sorter, the self-issue and self-return, that kind of thing. We haven't done any new ones yet. We really want to do an integration with Aggresso, but that is held up by the finance people rather than us. They're trying to do an upgrade of Aggresso, and that's been delayed, and a whole bunch of things like that has happened. It's on their roadmap. It's nearly at the top of their roadmap. It's very close, so hopefully we're hoping to get to that. The other thing actually with that is we're hoping, because we have our own in-house reading list system, that our IT people in enterprise systems are really interested in looking at that again, because they wrote it in the first place, and seeing if we can do a much better integrated thing via Alma, replacing Pack Tracker, rolling in our resource list software into something which they can support. So we're going to be looking at that over the next year. So that we'll be looking at some quite interesting things there. And our IT colleagues are really keen to do that. So we're hoping that this will release all of that now that we've got settled in. So then just finally, there are some strategic issues, which I don't know how many of you have looked at the UK list of top 10 things. There are some specific functional things in there, which people will no doubt pop up during the rest of the day. But we also identified some various strategic issues, which I can talk about more later this afternoon in my session. Around workflow improvements, I've alluded to analytics, the agile product improvement, and communications generally between us and Ex Libris. And we're going to have a meeting with the senior Ex Libris people at Igloo in a couple of weeks' time around all these points here. So any conversations about that this afternoon will be great, because we can feed those directly into the senior Ex Libris people in a couple of weeks' time.
So I'm going to concentrate now on the last year or so, so really what we've been up to in the last 12 months, since we sort of kicked off the project properly and up until the point at which we went live. So I was involved very much in the project as the project manager. At the time we started off with Alma, I was in the role of content acquisition librarian, so very much on the resource management and acquisition side. So I will be speaking a little bit about that in the next session as well. But for this particular talk, it's just about managing the project. So our project officially started back in July 2012. We had our kick-off meeting on site with Ex Libris in October. And at that point, we were planning to go live just around Easter time 2013. That didn't quite pan out, because what transpired when we had our kick-off meeting with Ex Libris, we did finally establish that a critical piece of functionality that we needed for when we went live wasn't actually going to be delivered until July. So we decided at that point we would need to review our go-live date, and we moved it from March until July. So that was a little bit of a interesting time and interesting discussions. The critical functionality for us was around bookings. We have a key text collection, which some of my colleagues will talk to you about later, and that's quite a big collection of short loan items. And usually we have about 12,000 books in that collection. And to ensure that the students get the maximum use of it, we need them to be able to book items in advance. So for us to keep that collection functioning in the way we needed it to, we needed that bookings element to be there. So our final implementation timetable, we went live at the end of August last year, so just over 1 year ago. And already we look back and think, what has happened in that time? Because it's incredible how quickly you get used to something and how far back what seemed at the time to be major issues and minor crises just go away. You gain that perspective. So who did we involve in managing the project? We didn't have any special project staff, no additional people. We brought people together from across the library to work on this. So we had a core project team of 7 people who were a mix of our library systems team and managers in different areas in the library. And more importantly than our project team, we had a group of people who we called Almazars. Now, these were drawn from staff actually in the teams working on the ground. And it was their input to this project that we really feel made the difference. So this is what enabled us to get such a good handle on the functionality of Alma itself, and prepare us for the period at which we went live. So the Almazars attended all the online training. They came along to sessions that we had with Exlibris. As they were going through and doing the testing, they were continually asking questions, thinking about how they could use Alma in a day-to-day setting. They were responsible for writing our local documentation, and they cascaded training to their colleagues. So all that wasn't done by the project team members, it was done by our Almazars, and we really feel that that was critical to our success. And as a group of people, they still have a lot of input into the way we look at Alma and think about changes that we can make. So they're continuing to flag bugs and issues and areas for improvement. So another important aspect of the project was obviously working with Exlibris. So it was really important for us to have a productive working relationship with them. We were assigned a project manager who was based in Germany, Sonia, who was absolutely excellent. And as the project manager here, I had regular calls with her to discuss progress. She was responsible for maintaining our project plan, and she liaised with other Exlibris teams, such as migration and Primo, to make sure that things were running on time and everything was in order. So what needed to happen happened at the right moment. There was also on the Exlibris side an implementation team who came here on site to do our 4-day functional workshop. So they were here to answer our questions. So this was in the period before we went live. They come on site for for us in particular, they came on site for 4 days, and we went through different aspects of Alma, and we asked lots of questions of them, some of which they could answer and some of which they couldn't. But they were learning the system very much at the same time that we were, so that was quite an interesting time, I think, for both sides there. And the implementation team were also responsible for answering all our Salesforce cases. So for those of you who may not be Exlibris customers already, Salesforce is the online customer relationship management system where we report problems. So the implementation team were responsible for handling all our queries at that point before we'd actually transferred to full Exlibris support team. So when it came to the go live date, we were as prepared as we could be. We felt we'd put a lot of effort in to get everything on track. We'd thought a lot about how to use Alma. We'd trained our colleagues. We'd written local documentation. And actually, by the time we went live, Alma itself was fine. We didn't have any nasty surprises there. What we did have was an unexpected problem with Primo, which meant that we had to stay in view-only mode for 6 days after we'd gone live. So my colleague Paula, who's going to talk to you about the fulfilment side of things, will mention this a bit more. But that meant that for the first 6 days, none of our users could log in to Primo and renew items or check things out or do requests and that sort of thing. So it was a little tricky, and as the slide shows, we dealt with a lot of queries during that time, which, if you think about it, a time when you're wanting your colleagues to get on and actually learn the new system was quite a challenge, but Paula will talk a bit about that. In the weeks following Go Live, we really concentrated on getting familiar in the real working environment with Alma and what it could do. So we were obviously continuing to train and support all our staff. We were also on the lookout for understanding and correcting any migrated records, because we'd done one test migration, and we thought we'd kind of got everything right, but inevitably there are things that crop up that you didn't quite anticipate. So there's a little bit of correction of records going on and some general tidying up. And we also had configuration settings to look at, because we didn't actually have access to any of the underlying configuration until just before we went live. So a few of us were trained I think the week before we went live, and until that point we couldn't actually see the detail of how Alma was configured. So we realised then that we needed to make some changes and do some tweaks. So things to do with our sort of setup of our libraries and so forth. We were also busy in that period immediately following Go Live with reporting bugs. So part of it was working out how Alma was supposed to work, and if it wasn't doing quite what we expected, was it a gap in our understanding or was it a bug? and sometimes it was bugs, so we had to report things. And as part of that, we also came across areas that we knew needed improvement, and not just in terms of our understanding of what was going on, but also in terms of the functionality. So those areas that we felt needed improvement most were resource sharing, which is interlibrary loans, and the workflow around e-resources. So both of those were areas where there was functionality that could be better. A key part of coping with Alma is dealing with the monthly releases. So every month, on schedule, you have no say in when this happens. There is a new monthly release of Alma, which introduces new functionality and bug fixes. So that is applied the first Sunday of every month. The Sunday previous to that, the new release is made available on the sandbox, which is a test environment. So you have a week to kind of go in and play and see if you can work out what's happening, if anything is changing the way that we do things. So we have to respond quite quickly to that. The comprehensive release notes are issued, as well as lists of things that have been resolved. Not absolutely everything is in that documentation, though, so despite the best will in the world, we do try to be prepared for when the release hits the live environment, but it's not always the case. The online help is kept up to date quite well by Ex Libris, so that's all okay. And they also do nice features alongside the release notes, so they will make available some what's new videos and some little show me how things that you can work through just to see what is meant to be different about a new piece of functionality. So the way that the Alma is continually updated every month has really led to a changed way of working by all our teams who work with Alma. So it's fair to say that there is far less involvement of the systems team in an ongoing basis in relation to Alma. The staff on the ground have much more ownership of what's happening with the system, and they feel much more engaged with it because they're the ones who are responsible for making sure that everything works on a day-to-day basis. So if there's a new element coming in, it's the teams themselves who need to get to grips with it, work out what's different, what's happening, and so forth. It's not down to our systems team to do that. It's down to the teams on the ground. They need to keep continually up to date with changes and new features and pass those on to colleagues as appropriate. And they need also to be aware of what changes coming in may have to happen to our existing workflows. So we may have a workflow that we think is okay, it's going well, but there may be a new piece of functionality coming in that means we have to make a change to that workflow or to a particular process. So that has to be kept under review all the time. And we are striving to keep our workflows as streamlined as possible. So that's a continual driver for us. Is what we're doing the most time efficient and cost effective way of doing something? And we're actively keeping that under review. So we're encouraging ideas and suggestions from all staff who are using Alma on a day-to-day basis. So they're discussing things amongst themselves. An example of this is our serials team have a monthly meeting, which they time to happen in the week of their release in the sandbox, so they can have a look at what's coming up new there, discuss it amongst themselves, decide what changes are having an impact and so forth, and then updating their local documentation as a result and making sure that their colleagues in the team know what's happening. So that's just one example of what's happening on the ground, how things have changed. So we're continuing, obviously, to communicate as effectively as we can with Ex Libris. We're using Salesforce to report issues and log enhancement requests, so things that we'd like to see improved. We have had contact with some developers, either on site or quite often over phone calls and WebEx sessions, where we go into detail about specific issues that we have or specific areas of functionality that we think could be streamlined and made better. We did have a period of top 5 calls with the head of development of Ex Libris, which happened from about, I think, October to February. And it was really during that period of time that we felt we were truly early adopters in a sort of partnership relationship with Ex Libris, because we had the ears of development and we were able to feed things through directly to them, so that was really good. And we're currently having monthly support calls with Ex Libris, which we're using to try to escalate key issues. So we maintain an issue log as part of the project. And although the project has now officially ended, those of us who are on the ALMA project team are continuing to have involvement because we've formed an ALMA steering group, is what we're calling it. We're meeting every month to discuss things, and during that meeting we are prioritising our outstanding issues to try and reach some resolution with them. So moving on, so by January, February time, we'd started to emerge from the shock and awe of having a brand new system, and we'd already started to move on to doing other things, so planning service improvements, such as a retrieval service for our site libraries, and we'd begun to work in depth on analytics and getting some reporting out of the system. We'd started work on our local project to improve the usability of the Discovery interface by April. So the sorts of things that we wanted to free up time to do, we've started to see that happening already. We still want to improve the bookings functionality, so we'll be spending some time on that over the next few months. And we really want to set up some integrations, which we haven't yet been able to do. So to do with our university finance people, so Aggresso, which is the finance system, and the online payments gateway, which is the service that students use to pay fines. They're still not integrated with ALMA yet. And we want to start looking more at key vendors for us and integrating their back-end systems with ALMA. So we tried to think about what key lessons we'd learnt during the project. We did have a debrief session while the project was running with all staff, so I think that was in December time, so a few months after we'd gone live. And we asked them what they felt had worked well, what hadn't worked so well, and what could we learn from the future. So these are some of the things that they told us. So it was really important to involve as many staff as possible when testing ALMA, because that was what created engagement from the teams, and it created a support network from people. One downside that we did experience with involving a lot of staff in early stage was when we were struggling to kind of get some, because we were early adopters, so we were taken on ALMA before there was certain aspects of it that were fully developed. And as I said before, we were learning alongside Ex Libris staff about how it all worked in certain instances. So we did have times when, for example, when we had the functional workshop on site, we had Ex Libris staff come, and the idea was that we would ask questions of them around our workflows and the capability and functionality of ALMA. And some of the conversations we had, our staff found quite frustrating because the Ex Libris staff didn't know quite as much about the system as we might have expected them to at that stage, because it was so early on in its development. So that was a period when I think it's fair to say some of the staff were a bit low morale and felt that this was going to be a difficult journey. But we got through it. ALMA did become all-consuming for the people who was ours. So one of the comments we had back was that support for staff doing business as usual might have suffered as a result because a lot of people were concentrating on ALMA. On the communication front, even if there was nothing very much to report, it's really important to let everybody know that that's happening, just to keep the channels of communication going, and really important to keep asking for feedback from people during and after the whole process. And we did learn to keep checking with our staff how they were feeling about everything, and accepting that there will be times when people's morale dips and they feel stressed, but acknowledging that fact and supporting them through the process. We got through it. It wasn't a big deal, actually. We didn't have too many downs. Those of you at the back may disagree with this in your later sessions, but it did feel that by and large everybody got on well and kind of coped with things, and there wasn't too much dissatisfaction. I think that's my perspective anyway as project manager. So 1 year on, overall staff are much happier, Alma itself has developed even further, and everything is quite good at the moment. So hence was having this day to explain to you what we've been doing. So just a small handful here of recommendations for those of you who might be managing the project. At the end of the implementation project, we were quite reluctant to switch from project mode to full support mode. So full support mode being what the Ex Libris support team would deliver for you, because we felt that we'd lose touch with the people who supported us through the implementation project, and who we felt they really understood who we were and what our needs were and what our priorities were. So we were worried about making that final switch, but we needn't have been. So really everything worked out fine. So I would say don't delay switching to full support. There's nothing to worry about there. Do order the premium sandbox. So the sandbox is the test environment. The premium sandbox has your own data on it. And that's really critical for testing purposes. So we make an awful lot of use of the premium sandbox now. And we use it to check out the monthly releases, but also if we're thinking about different ways of doing something, we can have a proper look at what might happen on the sandbox if we did that. Do keep talking to Ex Libris, so be very clear with them about what your expectations are, but also what your needs are. And if you're asking for something, make sure you explain why you want it and why it's important. If you want to suggest things are done differently, think of ways to do that in a constructive way. So be a critical friend and do prioritise your needs. So think about what's most important to you, because it can't all be delivered straight away. And finally, be inclusive. So for us, what's worked so well is working with a large team of colleagues, because we really wouldn't have succeeded without their knowledge and without their engagement in this process. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the project and how it was for the final year. Does anyone have any questions about that? Yes.
You mentioned that there are monthly releases of updates. Who manages that process right now and make sure that the right people know what the release is going to encompass?
So that's the responsibility of everybody, really. So everybody knows the schedule at which the releases are going to be produced, and it's managed internally within the teams on the ground. So they are looking out for the release notes that come out and the list of resolved issues and so forth. And in most cases, what happens is that they look at those as a team, so they come together and review them, or they would review them individually and then compare notes afterwards, so that they're as prepared as they can be. So it's not a kind of technical thing that we need to prepare for, it's very much a functionality, working on the ground type thing. And the releases are monthly at the moment, but we understand from Ex Libris that as Alma does become a more mature product in future years, they won't necessarily be monthly, because there will be fewer changes that obviously need to happen. So this next part of the morning is to run through a few different functional areas of Alma. So I'm going to make a start by looking at resource management and acquisitions, and then my colleague Paula is going to follow on with fulfilment, and finally Kingsley will talk about analytics. So resource management and acquisitions is the area in Alma that deal with the cataloguing and acquisition of resources. And when we kicked off the project, this was one of the areas that I was the manager of. So a few fundamental principles of Alma in relation to this area are the fact that print and electronic are administered in the one system. So previously we had more than one system to do these areas of work. The type of order that you set up determines the workflow that follows. So if you're placing an order and it's for a print one-time resource, that drives a certain workflow. If you're placing an order for a subscription to an electronic package, that will drive through a whole new workflow of steps. So that's an important fundamental principle. The print record has holdings and items, whereas the electronic record has portfolios. And the community zone is the knowledge base plus shared records. The institution zone, and this difference will be talked about later by my colleagues in one of the breakout sessions. The institution zone is where you have your local records. So within ALMA, you can view community zone records and you can view your own institution zone records, and you just flip between a tab to view the different ones. So when it comes to migrating data, we migrated data from both ALIF and SFX. So SFX was our link resolver. We did have Verde for e-resource management, but we didn't have an awful lot set up in it, to be honest. So we decided that we wouldn't start migrating things from Verde. We decided we'd rather make a clean break of it. And this was with advice from Ex Libris as well. So we just concentrated on migrating data from ALIF and SFX. I say just, it wasn't an easy process. A critical part of the migration and getting your head around what's what is getting something that's called the P to E file correct, because that determines what is created in ALMA as an electronic record as opposed to a print record. So that was quite a lot of time was devoted to understanding that, because we were one of the first libraries to do this, not the first ALIF library by any stretch. I think we were the third, but still I think during the process, as more libraries do it, you learn different things. So that is something key that you need to try and get right. When it comes to the area of cataloguing, colleagues tell me they found it fairly straightforward to adapt to. One of the benefits is that Library of Congress authority headings are included within ALMA. For us, a key improvement has been the bulk upload of MARC records. So where we have package subscriptions to ebooks, for example, the whole area of workflow around uploading a set of those MARC records to ALMA is far quicker than it was on ALIF. So what used to take staff at York 2 or 3 days a month to deal with all these package updates and MARC records now takes 2 to 3 hours a month. So there's been a big improvement there. The MARC records in the community zone are, as was mentioned earlier, of variable quality. So the serials ones tend to be better. They are at least CONSA standard, but the ebook ones generally are not great at the moment. So Ex Libris do know this, and there is a lot of effort being put in to try and get better quality records. But that explains why we still upload MARC records from suppliers rather than just activating those that are in the community zone, because quite often there is only just a title or possibly an author, and that's it. So that's not good enough quality for us. So on the wish list of cataloguing, number 1 is better quality records. We also would like to see better linking between related records, and this is something that is a bit patchy. So when we have related records, what we call analytical records, but that's where you've got the parent-child relationships and that sort of side of things. They don't always link in the way that we would expect. And again, this is something Ex Libris are actively working on at the moment. And we'd also like to see improved usability of authorities, because if you just click on more detail for an authority record from the Library of Congress, you see a fixed list of items that are returned, and you can't scroll down to the bottom, beyond the list that appears in front of you on the screen. So that's something in particular that we'd like to see improved. Now for ordering, just to say a bit about how we do ordering at York. We're not fully shelf ready. We have our own unique classification scheme, so we don't get shelf ready books from our suppliers. And what we do, though, is we think we've got quite a streamlined process. So we use EDI ordering, but at the point of order, we download a free catalogue record from the Library of Congress, and then we attach an order record to that, which is sent off to our suppliers via EDI. We don't use EOD, which stands for Embedded Order Delivery, which is a way of ordering that other ALMA libraries do use. So that's where they place the order on the supplier's database, and ALMA receives a file from the supplier database, which includes fulfillment information, so item records, as well as the bibliographic details. So we don't do that side of it, and that side of it was quite problematic to start with for some of the early adopter libraries. But the way we did EDI ordering and EDI invoicing was actually set up very quickly. So we had ordering going within a day or two of go live, and invoicing very quickly after that. So that all worked well. Claiming is quite limited, so you can send a claim once for a one-off or continuous order, and thereafter ALMA doesn't really handle follow-up very well. And we're still need to input order status reports from our suppliers manually. So in Aleph, we'd set that up as an EDI process, but that isn't available in Alma yet. So we've had to revert to reporting on things like not yet published or out of print that our suppliers send us. We have to input those manually into our order records. So our wish list for ordering is that we'd like to see more integration with vendor systems, so improved EDI functionality where appropriate, or more APIs. So, for example, we've been beta testing some integration with SweatsWise, which would allow us to order a new subscription on SweatsWise, and for those details to then be transferred into Alma. So that would include things like all the Sweats order numbers and so forth. And then our order record, when that was created automatically by that process, would send back our order number and so forth into SweatsWise. So we've been doing some beta testing around that. We know we need to do local work to integrate with Aggresso, as has already been mentioned. What we'd also like to see from Ex Libris, and this is on the roadmap for 2015, is integration with Primo, so that would allow our users to actually fill out a suggestion form in Primo that would then create an order record in Alma. And what would be really nice is for that to be able to then be transferred onto interlibrary loans. For example, if we decided not to order it, could it become an interlibrary loan request, and vice versa? If somebody submitted an interlibrary loan request, could we make it into an order? So those are the sorts of things that we'd like to see. When it comes to activating e-resources, Alma works in a very similar way to SFX. It's fair to say that when we first went live a year ago, there wasn't very much in the way of documentation around this area. And therefore, as a result, our understanding of what was happening in terms of activating e-resources and managing them was quite limited because it hadn't really been covered particularly well in training either. But gradually we've got there and we've improved. Our understanding and the documentation has improved as well, which has been good to see. There are weekly reports which come out of changes to the knowledge base, which we go through and make changes in our institution zone as appropriate, or we activate things if they've become available, that sort of thing. So we're doing that on a weekly basis and trying to keep on top of it. So wish list for e-resource management is that we'd like to see improved linking. So a minority of packages still use metadata to generate links rather than DOIs, and this can result in problems. And we have reported this to Ex Libris, and they are actively working on phasing out the linking that relies on metadata. So that's good. We have noticed that there can be delays in developing links to new platforms, such as the Royal College of Nursing one, for example. And I'm sure this is a problem in SFX as well, but it's mirrored in Alma. So we're having to wait quite a while to see new things to be set up, which this particular example is an issue because it means that article level linking isn't available for links that go through to journals on this platform. It's just title level. And echoing what we always said about SFX, we'd like to see better currency of information in the knowledge base. So for things to be updated quicker in relation to, say, for example, every year the years available to us on things like JSTOR change, and it can seem to be a bit of a delay before that is reflected in Alma, and the same with changes to publisher packages and so forth. So in terms of other e-resource management issues, just to clarify for anyone who's thinking of going to an afternoon breakout session in this area, that we haven't yet got experience of these particular things. So we haven't yet set up licenses in Alma. We're actually waiting for machine-readable licenses to be introduced because that will save us a bit of time in doing all that setup. So we're just hanging fire on that for the time being. We haven't done much investigation or really tried to use the trials functionality because we're not convinced that it's going to save us a lot of time. So the jury's out on that one. We haven't yet used PDA functionality. There is specific functionality within Alma to help you when you're running patron-driven acquisition, but we haven't yet done any PDA since we've had Alma. Still on the wish list for e-resource management is a better usage statistics tool. So UStat is still there and we're still expected to use it. What we'd really like to see is integration with other tools like JUSP, the JISC service. Obviously, we'd like reliable cost per download metrics, so they're still not available to us in Alma because of, it's not everything's available in UStat for a start, and we haven't really got to grips with analytics in terms of giving us that cost per download information. We remain to be convinced that that will work for us in its current state. As far as budgeting and financial management goes, Alma works well. So there are 3 levels of budgets. At the top level, a ledger. Then you have a summary fund and then an allocated fund. And we had no issues in setting up Alma to help us with this. We've done the financial year rollover recently at the end of July, and that was a success. There were no problems there, and it was even more straightforward than it was in Aleph, so nothing to worry about there. We have quite a good invoicing workflow set up, which you can build in approvals at different stages and limit each step to a particular group of people if you wish, so that works well for us. And it is possible to configure export to university finance systems once you're ready to do so. So obviously, top of our wish list is local integration with Aggresso.
Hello, my name's Paula Montenegro and I'm Customer Services Manager at the main University Library, in charge of the circulation or the help desk. So I've been asked to give a brief overview of how we dealt with the implementation of Alma relating to the more customer-focused side of things, working on the help desk and with the frontline staff. One of the things I would recommend is try and network with other Alma libraries. Unfortunately, when we went live, there weren't that many ahead of us. There was Lancaster, Imperial College, etc. But since we've gone live, we've actually hosted probably half a dozen visits from other institutions coming asking us, and I would highly recommend it. It gives you a better overview of how Alma actually works on a day-to-day basis. The other thing that we did in our preparation was also identify your workflows, which ones you have to have, and when you do your testing, how does that work with Alma? But you need to have a degree of flexibility here because obviously changing systems, Alma isn't going to do exactly what you're currently doing. You have to have that ability to think, well, okay, it doesn't work exactly like this. How does it work? That's fine, we can work with that. So before you start your testing, work out what you need to have in place. But as I say, be flexible about it. We've already mentioned the ZARs. We actually identified staff who we wanted to get involved with the testing phase, people who were quite analytical, didn't mind getting things wrong, because during your testing phase, you are working and thinking, it isn't working how I expected, is it me, is it a bug, is it a configuration change? So you want people who are confident in dealing with that kind of pressure. And we actually were given the Alma sandbox, which was Ex Libris data, like a sample data. And I have to admit, I think we all struggled with doing the testing at that point because it wasn't our data, it wasn't our configuration. And it's only around Easter time 2013 that we got we could view our production survey. It wasn't yet live, but we could view our data and our configuration. And because it was more familiar to us, that was at the point we thought we were getting to grips of doing the testing. So, don't be afraid. We waited till April, and then from April, May, and June, we did an awful lot of testing at that point. And already mentioned, the ZARs, the fulfillment ZARs, and the rest of the ZARs did the same kind of thing. To help us understand what we were doing, we actually started writing our documentation. So we could go back and retrace our steps and see where we were. And that actually then developed into training documentation, which we use in our training processes. So I just wanted to highlight the 3 things that we definitely had to have. And they were, 2 things, I can't count. These were customer-focused aspects that we needed. Before we started testing with Alma, we'd actually done a loans review, and one of the essential criteria we had to have was for our flexible loan policy, was to make sure that we had the functionality to be able to charge fines for items that were recalled and overdue, and Alma didn't have that, so we had to have that functionality. And the other one was, as we mentioned, the bookings functionality. Unfortunately, both these functionalities were released fairly late on in the day, and particularly the bookings one We were due to go live August bank holiday weekend. We got the bookings functionality in August release. I think there was Vicky and myself, there were only 2 ZARs who were available at that point. We had to test this in 4 days. So there was a lot of testing at that point, quite high pressured. And we literally had, as I say at the end, a leap of faith. When we went back to the Alma project group, is it working as we expected? We literally said, we think so. And we had to make the decision then, yes, let's go live with it. It was kind of a, well, we've done all this testing, we've started all the training, could we really go through this all over again? It was really like, yeah, let's just go for it. Let's just take the leap and see what happens. As one of my colleagues said, nobody will die in this whole process. And the actual launch, positively, from the customer services side of things, the implementation was made on the bank holiday Monday. We were closed. Tuesday, we all came to work. We could issue, we could return, we could pay fines, we could do everything we needed to do on that first day. So that was the good news. The not so good news, as we've already mentioned, was we had no Primo, no Your Search as we call it, for 6 days. That was bad planning on our part. With hindsight, we should have given longer for the users to have their items for. By not doing that, we had lots of emails from our users saying, I can't renew my items. There was lots of communication. It created undue pressure. So, as I say, we coped with all the emails. And I've mentioned here that the staff didn't feel ready. They were very apprehensive about going live. But the fact, because of this curveball we had, not being able to renew, they not only coped with that and going live in the new system, they actually did brilliantly, you know, and we can cope with a crisis due to teamwork. So I think the more staff you're involved and the more engagement you get, if something goes wrong, you just naturally support each other and work well in that way. The other thing I was going to mention, because we're the frontline services, is how we communicate to our users. It's really important to let them know we are changing systems. It may be different, you may not be able to do certain things, just bear with us. So a lot of our communication went out before we went live, during the go live, and to date, we still update our customers as what's going on. We're honest about when things go wrong with Alma and Your Search and Primo, sorry. We actually have a web page that users can actually view and see where things are not working, where there's an improvement or where there's a bug. We actually say, very sorry, something's going wrong here, bear with us, we'll try and get it fixed. And we also announce when something's improved, when it's a good thing, and actually let them know the changes to the system. Just to take a step back again to mention the ZARs, I know we've gone on about this before, but the ZARs we involved with the fulfilment, they were from grade 3, 4 and 5. It was given to them as an opportunity, A, to work collaboratively. It helped them develop skills that some of them hadn't had before, such as presentation skills and creating documentation. But it meant that when you actually went live, you had a core group of staff who also had far more knowledge. Just to deal with it on my own would have just been impossible. So actually having half a dozen staff who knew as much, if not more, about Alma than I did when we were going live was invaluable. So, you know, it really works having that kind of group of people to help. And as I say, the ZARs actually were instrumental in helping with the training. Taking a step back for how the rest of the staff felt about it, there was a lot of apprehension, and it is this timing of when do you think we can actually start the training. Because of the monthly updates, you think if we start too soon, will things change, especially with us being early adopters. So we started our training, I think, July. So we had like a month of training. We had hands-on sessions where staff would come along and we'd do demonstrations, a bit like this, and then they get to actually play with it. They also then used the documentation so they could do the work at their own pace. They worked together. It was really interesting to see staff asking questions of each other and going, how have you done this? Did you know you could do this? Am I doing this right? There was a real good interaction amongst the team. And as I mentioned about the ZARs, they presented the training sessions. And because being frontline services, and I'm sure the rest of you have similar situations, we have a lot of evening and weekend assistants. So when we actually went live, the ZARs were willing to come in evenings and weekends to be support for the team who normally work those hours. So the first time they actually worked a live shift, as it were, with Alma, there was a ZAR there who could answer questions, give them training on the job as well. And I think without that, we would have really struggled getting the staff to the confidence where they are now. When we were going live, or while we were doing the training and after going live, we asked staff to report problems. And that first week, never mind Primo not working properly, there was obviously problems with Alma as well. we actually ask staff to rank the problems, i.e. if it's really high, i.e. it's stopping something happening, it's stopping someone doing what they needed to do, rank it as high, we'll get immediate action on it. It could be a configuration issue, but if we can't fix it, we'll get Ex Libris to fix it. The other way we said, well, if it's a medium problem, if it's something you think, well, it's not ideal, but I found a workaround, rank it as medium, we will get it fixed in due course. And the other way we did it was if it's annoying, in other words, for example, paying fines, at the initial stages you had to do 2 clicks, nothing essential, it's just annoying, then just rank it as low. And all the problems were logged on our fulfilment Google Doc, and anything serious from there I would then escalate to the main project team's documentation to report to Ex Libris. But we actually still use this fulfilment problem log today because problems still occur or suggestions are made or something like that, so we still refer back to it. And 1 year on, staff are finding new workarounds or they're finding new enhancements that weren't in the documentation. So we can actually go, oh, did you know it did this? I didn't see that in documentation. So staff are telling each other where the improvements are as well. I did want to mention the slump. This is something that you'll all go through whenever you go with a new library system. You've got the big haul, the training, the push to go to the go live day, and you think we've hit go live, yes, everything will be brilliant, that's it, we've achieved it. But of course, once you've gone live, you've got all the additional problems you have to deal with, and you do have that little bit of a, whew, and you have to keep staff motivated. I mean, for some reason, staff felt that they weren't providing the same level of service. They were doing really brilliantly, but for their own perception, because they're so customer focused, they felt they didn't know enough, that the students, the customers weren't getting the same level of service. They were. So I would say after you go live, keep them motivated. We rely a lot on cakes. We're big cake eaters at York. It cost me a fortune from the local bakers. And the other thing we also did was we introduced weekly training sessions, which we are continuing today. But the initial idea was to have these weekly training sessions so we could update people, go over training. You know, is there anything else you need to go refresh yourself with? And so initially it was all to do with Alma. Today we still do it. It's less to do with Alma, maybe the odd enhancement, but it's still invaluable for staff, so we've kept it on. So that's one recommendation. If you can implement that, it's definitely worth doing. Mentioning about improvements, a couple of things that we would really, again, these are more customer focused, that would be really good if we could get these fixed. Currently, all our records are downloaded via Patron Load, and these are classed as externally controlled accounts. And unfortunately, we can't change the expiry dates. This is something we used to be able to do on our other system, Aleph, and it's one of those things, you never feel like going to Ex Libris and go, well, on Aleph we could do this. It's a bit like you're telling tales. But it was a really useful functionality on Aleph that we'd like to have on Alma. They are going to fix it, but this is the problem you sometimes find. It can take a while to get that fix in place. We're talking now, I think it's the first quarter of 2015. And with this particular case where we wanted to be able to change expiry dates without them being overwritten, initially Ex Libris didn't see the value in it, so we actually had to make a case for it to say, well, this is why. We had to explain the situations of when we'd want to use this, so be aware that sometimes you have to do that kind of thing. We talked about bookings. Bookings functionality was one of our key things we had to have. And as I say, we had 4 days to test it, and they delivered us something. But it still needs a huge amount of improvement. We use bookings for our 4-hour-long key text collection, but currently users can book to the minute. And this is what we're trying to explain to Ex Libris, that it's really not functional to be able to book to the minute. If someone books from 12:15 to 13:37, how does the next person know when they can book? Because the matching availability doesn't reflect that accuracy. So there's a bit of discrepancy in how that is displayed. And we really want that improving because we are reliant on that for our key text collection. Again, this kind of thing we'll show in this afternoon's fulfilment sessions in more detail. And another thing, again, it's affecting the customers, this is what we'd like fixing, is Alma is really good with their notices. I will give them that. And if an item is recalled, they get a recall notice. But unfortunately, it goes against our flexible loan policy. If an item is cancelled, if a recall is cancelled, we then notify the user. But we don't want to notify the user because that isn't part of our flexible loan policy. But the notices are all bundled together, and we want to have that ability to stop one notice going, but still have the other notice sent. Again, we were sort of told by Ex Libris, yes, this will be available. I think it was supposed to be the November release, but that's now being pushed back to, again, I think the first quarter in 2015. So there's these little things that we'd really like to see improvements on. Having said all this, just to give you the nice thing about Alma, fulfilment, apart from the spelling of it with 2 L's, put that aside, it's a very functional library management system as far as the circulation services go. It does exactly what you expect it to do. There's good functionality in making items claim returned or lost, etc. The emails are really good. Monthly upgrades, I say, always useful having those to get the new developments. There are minor quirks, a little bit of dead end every now and then. You kind of go one route and you think, I didn't expect to get there, but nothing of great significance. Email notifications. I'm not au fait with HTML, but I can update the email notices, so there's great functionality in there. It copies all the emails you send to the user's account. There's a new functionality come in whereby if you email direct from the user's account, so it's a personal email, it's an ad hoc email, that too will attach to the user's account. So you've got a nice record of what you've emailed the user. So when the user comes back and goes, I didn't get that email, you've got a copy to say, this is the email we sent you. Always really useful. And little nice things like you get a weekly summary report. I think Lancaster only send a weekly summary report. They don't send overdue reminders. We send loads. I think we send way too many. But the weekly summary report is a real nice feature. Every Monday morning, your user will get, this is what you got on loan, these are your charges, this is what you need to renew. So that's really nice. And the other thing is configuration changes. If you go through the configuration training, it does take some getting your head round, I have to admit. But if you make a change, it's immediate. I know on Aleph, I'd have to ask Kingsley, can you restart the server? Can you drop a table? Can you do all this? With the configuration changes on Alma, it's immediate. But it is vital to do all your testing on the sandbox. We have a premium sandbox, which is really useful, because any changes you make, as I say, with going live immediately, you need to make sure you're confident in what you're changing. Word of warning on like using testing on Alma. I know a few weeks ago, I managed to waive everybody's fines. Fortunately on the sandbox, not on the live server, but it was one of those cold sweat moments where you think, thank God I was on the sandbox and not on the... Mind you, I think the students would have been quite pleased if I'd waived all their fines. So that's a very short run-through of what we're doing with Alma Fulfilment at the moment.
So I've been asked to say something about the reporting functionality within Alma. Obviously extracting statistical reports, management reports, and also reports needed for operational purposes is important. And so the purpose of this presentation is, first of all, to give you an overview of the types of reports and statistical information that can be extracted from Alma and the ways in which it can be presented. There are 2 ways in which reports can be generated. First of all, there are a number of reports you can actually generate within the Alma staff interface itself, and particularly for bibliographic information. But the other way is through what are called Alma Analytics. And so within the Alma staff interface, particularly information about bibliographical and item data, this is often the best way. And in fact, as I discovered just this last week, there are certain reports that you can only get through the interface. So we wanted a report of bibliographic records which didn't have item records or didn't have holdings records. Because analytics assumes that if it's a physical item, it's held physically. And if you don't have that information, you can't extract it. But within the Alma interface, you can get that type of report. So the 2 are complementary rather than perhaps overlapping. The thing about using Alma, the staff interface, is that the information is in real time and you're accessing the live data. And the way to produce such reports is through the repository search functionality, and you have a simple searches and also advanced searches. And advanced search is particularly useful for more detailed searches, and you can include a number of conditions to filter the results. So, I mean, we tend to use that. Well, I use it a lot. And from the advanced search or even the simple search, you can create sets of data. Essentially, they're sets of IDs, as you would have in other systems. And the concept of a logical set, which, if you have a set based on certain criteria, if you run it tomorrow, you may get more results, you may get fewer results. So it runs, as it were, in real time, constantly updated, whereas an itemized set is of just the records that you have specified. And those sets can be used for producing reports. They can also be used as an input file for batch processes. So if you want to change a set of records, you create your set first, and then you run the report. And in fact, most of the batch processes in ALMA require a set. We did have that issue sometimes with ALMA, with Aleph, that certain reports you could run without a set equivalent, and that could cause problems if you forgot to actually specify. ALMA, there is that safeguard in that respect. And you can now combine sets. You can compare them with Boolean operators. So it's quite flexible in that sense. But for most reports, you would use the ALMA Analytics functionality. And this is a third-party product, Oracle Business Intelligence. And this is a data warehouse. And it has a nice Windows interface. And the data is updated each evening around 9 o'clock in the evening. And so this is not real-time data, and it's not using the live system. So there can be issues. For example, we wanted a report of returns in the previous day. Because we're open 24 hours a day, an analytics report wouldn't produce all the returns because it would only go up to 9 o'clock. So we had to adjust it to 2 days ago to get that sort of thing. So that's a thing to be borne in mind. But however, on the plus side, because it has a Windows interface, it can be used and is used by suitably trained staff. People can produce their own reports. It doesn't rely on system staff producing them for them. And because it's not the live system, it's a separate interface, it's quite safe, so you can't do anything dangerous. Unlike ALMA, there aren't the batch processes. You're not actually changing any data. You're simply extracting reports. So people can use it without getting too apprehensive. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You continue working on your report until you get the results that you would expect. There are some out-of-the-box reports that are provided by Ex Libris, and they sometimes change with the monthly releases. Now, you wouldn't actually use those neat, but you can copy them into your own area, make the necessary adjustments for the parameters and filters that you need. So it is a useful start to actually see something that has been produced and you think, yes, this is a count of loans during a particular period. Yes, that gives me a start, but I need to specify my own libraries or other parameters that we need. And the same applies to reports created by other libraries. There is a shared area for the community, and some libraries have shared their reports. I think we've only actually got around to sharing about one of ours, but the idea is that you can share with other libraries. Again, you have to make adjustments for your own particular situation, the way your data is configured and so on. Just to go into some of the basics of analytics, the data is divided into certain categories called subject areas. And some of these are perhaps rather more self-evident than others. So borrowing requests are actually interlending requests that you have made from other libraries, whereas lending requests is items that you have lent to other libraries. We don't actually use that functionality in Alma. It does exist, but we simply use the fulfillment circulation for that purpose. And some of them we haven't really used, like the cost usage. E-inventory is for reporting on electronic resources. Events, again, we haven't actually really used. Fines and fees, so that's the fines aspects of circulation. Fulfillment is Alma speak for circulation. So any circulation activities can be reported there. And funds expenditure, particularly for acquisitions. Physical items, so that's where you actually search on your physical inventory, material that you actually hold within the library. Requests, that covers bookings as well as hold requests and recalls. And the usage data, again, we haven't made much use of that. And users, so that's information on categories of borrowers and so on. So it's divided into these areas, but you can combine some of them to produce the reports that you require. And a concept to sort of bear in mind is that within each subject area, you have two types of data. You have, first of all, measures, and they're indicated by those yellow icons. So at the for there, they are measures. So they are sort of preset, pre-calculated counts. So the number of requests. So you don't actually have to put in a calculation to get the number of requests, although you can do so if you wish. So they're very useful, those measures. And then the blue icons are the actual data fields. And so they're in like little folders of all the various data that you can extract. There are more advanced things you can do. So you can incorporate prompts. And this is useful if we want to set up a report for other staff to use. So there may be variable parameters that you want to put in. So, for example, a date range, loans between particular range of dates. So you can set up the report with all the necessary parameters, but for the date range, a prompt will be displayed, and then the person running the report will enter the start date, the end date, or the number of requests, the number of loans, or so on. So that's a very useful function for setting up, particularly reports that you might want to run quite regularly. But obviously the parameters will vary according to when you're running them. It is possible to incorporate SQL expressions. So although it's a Windows interface, you can actually do more detailed reports using SQL. So my colleague and I, we've been doing reports using SQL for a number of years. That experience, that knowledge isn't lost. It can be applied to analytics. And I've managed to find that very useful, actually. You can combine, as I say, data from multiple subject areas. The measures, on the whole, are shared. So if you've got a measure in a different subject area, you can combine your subject area you're using with that other one and use the measures. But as far as the fields are concerned, there is some limitation. There are set, predefined, shared dimensions is what they're called. They are the fields in one subject area that are available in another. But there are limitations on that. One way of getting round that, which we found is quite useful, is to use what they call sub-queries. Effectively, you run report in one subject area to produce an input file of IDs. Then the next report may be in a different subject area, but that ID is available within that subject area, and you can use that as an input file. I don't know if there's a limit, but I've certainly created one where you get one report produced as an input file, used as input for another subject area, and then a third report is the final one that uses the results of that second report as a subject as an input file, if that makes any sense. But you're not actually running the three reports separately. You run the final report, which automatically runs the earlier ones. So as far as you're concerned, you're just running a report, but it's set up in perhaps 2 or 3 additional ones. And that is a useful way of getting around some of the limitations of the shared dimensions that are available. The hope is, of course, that in time with monthly releases, there will be more shared dimensions to make that easier to produce reports. So this shows the file structure of, you can set up your own reports, which are only for you. Then there's the ALMA, which are the out-of-the-box reports produced by Ex Libris. Then you've got the community, and you'll see that different library folders for that. And then our own ones, and we've set up a number of folders and subfolders to sort of try and organize the reports so that they can be found fairly easily. And as you can see, you can give a meaningful subject name to the reports, and also a fuller explanation of what the report is for. And we made a decision that we found it would be very useful if we could put the initials of the person who's created it. So we knew that, oh yes, that was one that I created. This is an example of one of our particularly important reports, what we call the fast track report. And this is run daily, and it identifies titles which have 3 or more requests on them. And the purpose of the report is to alert us to titles in heavy use where we might wish to consider either buying an electronic version, if that is available, or additional print copies. And so you'll see that you've got the bibliographic information. We've just got the author, the title, the date of publication, and then the MMS ID is the record number, the bibliographic record number. And then certain counts, which is a bit clearer in this slide. So the number of items, the top one is a bit of an anomaly. It's the British Archaeological Reports, where we've got lots of volumes. But if we look at some of the others, so the number of items, copies that we have, physical copies, the number of portfolios, in other words, if we have an e-book and the number, so these two here, we've got 6 print copies, and we've got 1 package portfolio. The number of requests, which in this case will always be more than 3, and of those requests, any that are actually on the hold shelf waiting for someone to collect. So this is a rather sort of critical report, which we spent a bit of time trying to get to work and to refine, but it does serve our purpose. And so when you're setting up the report, you have the fields that you wish to display, and you simply double-click on a field name and it copies in, and then the filters that are used. And this is an example of where there's another report that runs first that produces the input file. And then what do the reports look like that you get in the end? Well, you can view your report in Analytics itself. You can also view them within Alma as a widget, and this will appear on your home page if you subscribe to that particular report, or as an email. You can receive an email, again, if you subscribe. You can use files to export to other applications. You can use it as an input file to create a set in Alma. So, for example, you can't create a set based on users within Alma, but you can create it within Analytics and import it into Alma. So if you want to make a batch change of a group of users. Different formats, pivot tables, graphs, pie charts, can be in Excel or a PDF or a PowerPoint or in a text format as well. So in the Alma widget, so this would appear if you subscribe on your homepage, be a pivot table, which is the sort of standard view that you would see in Analytics, or you can have something like a graph. You can have pie charts and other things as well, so a more visual representation. Or you can have it sent as an email, and that comes as an attachment in either PDF, Excel, or a text format, depending on what you specify. So just a summary, Analytics is very flexible. There are limitations, but as was indicated earlier, we didn't really start to look at Analytics until this year because it wasn't the highest priority. The high priority was getting the system to work. So we're still learning. There were things we thought that were not possible that actually we found are. There are enhancements which do come through. So we're building up that knowledge. The important thing is that it's not restricted to system staff to be used. It is usable by other staff, and they do use it. And the importance of the Alma community. So one of the issues that's coming up at the moment, of course, is the use of SCONL statistics. We all have the same needs, although, of course, we may record data in different ways. Thank you very much.